Collected Essays of Valerie Lynn Stevens. Lightning in a Bottle. Oftentimes, one of the greatest paradoxes of the human condition and experience lies in how the self-preservationary instinct must often sublimate itself via the conduit of self-destructive and/or negating means of methodology. To clarify, it is often that which we must do or that which we must be in order to survive, which acts in direct opposition to that of our own thrivance or self-actualization. Furthermore, this human dilemma and often multilemma is what German existentialist philosopher Martin Heidegger called our existentialia, which includes all of those exigencies which our lives place upon us, both externally and internally. The external things, of course, having to do with the fulfillment of our practical and physical needs, the most basic means and ends of our self-preservation. Those internal agencies of the human existentialia, of course, concern that which has to do with the so-called intangibles of self-actualization, or with those psychological methods which each human individual must often employ in defense of one's personal integrity and dignity. Moreover, such metaphysical matters concern that most epic human quest to live one's life as authentically as one can in accordance to one's individual moral and/or ethical code. In fact, many believe this brand of self-interest as a prerequisite to all other pleasantries and successes of communal existence. For each individual, the answer to the questions of this human condition and experience will, of course, vary. Some take a more extroverted, sensate approach towards seeking the answers to each their own existence. Others work more from the inside out. In a word, some are better suited for a more introspective approach. Those of this persuasion seek the answers through the mediums of reflection and contemplation. In essence, their interaction with life is on a more intuitive and intellective level, whereas for the former mentioned persons, they have more faith in the pragmatic consistencies of material and experiential engagement with the world outside of themselves in bringing their fates to fruition. However, of course, both methods are sound as long as their intent and goal remain morally, ethically prescribed and circumscribed, and as long as each individual learns to accommodate enough of these methods and approaches not in line with their most natural and preferred way of being, so that we all, no matter our particular brand of individualistic typology, might continue to grow and develop into more well-rounded persons. Although, unfortunately, since the world recognizes and rewards action more than deep thought, people of the latter, more extroverted persuasion are usually afforded more of a sense of communality than those of their counterparts. However, most introverts, quote-unquote, are usually quite self-sufficient enough. They will be especially quick to point out, to compensate for any savoir-faire and socio-political drive or appeal which they may lack. In finale, living amongst other individuals who are just as complicated and solipsistic as we are is oftentimes felt by persons of all typologies to be a Sisyphean task to achieve, and thus also often a futile attempt at compromise. However, we depend upon other human beings in large part for our very sense of purpose. One cannot find fulfillment living within a vacuum, or, as the old maxim reveals, nature abhors a vacuum. Thus, we can already see the complexity of human existence itself, let alone that of seizing control over the means by which one resolves each their own private and very personal ultimates, while also grappling with the task of one's own survival, both physically and psychospiritually. It is difficult enough to quiet the turmoil of the human soul, to be able to get by each and every day, let alone to synthesize the crude limitations placed upon our potentiation. But feeling as if our spirit is too large for the small-minded world in which we live is, of course, a universal and intractable aspect of our human experience. But if indeed perception becomes what we perceive to be, and thus allow, through our behavior, to become even further rooted in actuality, then the best we can do is in the systematic refinement of our spirits and intellects, or the careful, diligent cultivation of our inmost selves into that which we wish to bring to fruition externally in the world, as within, so without, comes to manifest itself thus time and again. For if any true worth or nobility is to be breached by any one human individual, it must spring forth first from within. I suppose it is best described as a practice of inward cultivation before outward realization. And, contrary to the world which mainly exalts mindless pragmatism, whilst belittling and scoffing at a more circumspect, methodical approach, the latter methodology is often discovered to be much more profound and efficacious regarding the individual's quest of self-actualization and fulfillment, especially in relation to the collective. In the end, both means and ends must of course be duly weighed when they involve the ultimates of this human existence. Nevertheless, all quandaries and margins for human error aside, each and every individual must grapple with keeping drawn a very distinct boundary line between what one does in order to survive versus what one must also do to live by the dictates of their inmost cherished and authentic soul's desires, values, and dreams, as we all face a continual struggle of reconciliation between the paradoxes of this life. Yet although our need to survive will often violently collide with that of our need to thrive, the reasoning of both heart and head are best granted equal deference. For ultimately, if we fail to dream, if we fail to love, if we forget how to laugh, to cry, but most of all how to most deeply, humanly, and honestly live, it is then that we will have truly ceased to both survive and thrive.